welcome back. As you can tell, we are doing a very chill September wrap up. This is going to be chill for two reasons. One, I read a lot of fluff. I read a lot of nonfiction, memoirs, I read a lot of rereads, so a lot of this shit is going to be stuff that you guys have either heard about, heard me talk about. Feel free to skip this video. I'm gonna go ahead and get into it though. The first two books that I read were A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I still, after 3 years of being on this hell site, don't know how to pronounce her name. Anyway, I read A Court of Mist and Fury and gave it 5 stars back in the day. Definitely still a 5-star read for me. I still think it is the best out of the series. A Court of Wings and Ruin, when I read it though, I think I originally gave it 2-star, 3-star, something like that. I remember being very disappointed in it. And this time, rereading them, I read them back to back. And if you guys know, I unhauled them not too long ago. And I actually ended up repurchasing the paperback, like the big floppy paperback versions of them. I'm not gonna have any of these books. I'm just gonna end up putting pictures on the screen for you guys. Bear with me. But I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. According to Goodreads, I gave it 4 stars. And for me, I think the reason why I originally didn't like it is because the way the second book ends, Feyre is like taken away from the Night Court. And the beginning of the third book is a lot of her attempting to get back to the Night Court. And in a way, like she's also trying to do a little bit of espionage, but it's like the beginning of it really lags. But for me, I love the characters. So getting back into the world and getting to experience it back to back as opposed to having to wait for the third one to come out, for me, it was much more enjoyable because I'm so, like, this made me realize that I'm such a character person when it comes to the books that I read, that getting to experience them nonstop from one book to the next made the third one much more enjoyable because originally there was like a lot of a lag between them. For me, it's definitely the characters in this series that does it for me. I feel like for a lot of people, it's probably the smut in the third book. There's a lot of smut in the second book. There's a lot of smut in the third one, but it feels kind of weird and disjointed. So for me, it was just like the culmination of all the stories coming together really spoke to me as well. It reminded me why I like Sarah's writing so much. And I know there's like discussion on if she's a good writer or whatever. And I don't care. Like, I'm unabashedly like a fan of her stuff. Like, I'm really excited. They just announced the new book in the series that kind of is in the same world as this one. People were going off about the cover. Like, people just like wanted to find something, I think, at this point to kind of be mad about. And I'm basically just over here like, yeah, I don't really care. Like, I like the cover. I'm not like in love with it, but I like it. I'm just excited for the series. I'm excited for more character development, more backstory on some people. I don't give a shit. Like, I am just a fangirl, and frankly, I don't really care if people like it or don't like it at this point. The next book that I read, I got this book from a recommendation from Casey McQuiston, and she wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue. I believe that's her name. But anyway, there was an article of romance authors recommending books, or just authors in general, I believe, recommending books to readers on Goodreads. This one I ended up giving 3 stars. It is called Changing Lanes. This is an independently Amazon published book, I believe. From what I've heard, I think the author did their own artwork and such like that, so I think that's really cool. But for me, this book was fun. It follows our main character, Stella, and she moves to upstate New York following the divorce of her husband. And if you watched my channel not too long ago, I thought this was going to be a 5-star read for me, but there was a couple things I didn't really like about it. Things that I did like I said, Stella leaves her husband and moved upstate New York to follow one of her favorite authors, basically, like to move to the town that they live in. Not necessarily to be creepy, but that's just kind of like where her arrow lands. She's like, all right, I'm gonna move there. She divorces her husband because after 20 years because he starts cheating on her with her best friend. So right then and there, I'm like, this is sort of cliche, you know, kind of like half a point lost. The other thing about this book is once she gets there, she starts trying to sort of figure out where she fits. And the thing about Stella is she's very intelligent. She didn't go to school though. She really likes cars and automobiles and, you know, motorcycles and things like that. So she attempts to get a job in this small town working at a shop, like an auto body shop. And it doesn't really work out for her. And so for me, there's some points in the book because Stella's supposed to be different. It wasn't really like a I'm not like other girls kind of thing because Stella does have a lot of insecurities, which is something I did like about the book, because she does address that and sort of work through it. But for example, when she starts having a little bit of a romance with her next door neighbor Lane, who also has the same name as her ex-husband, which for me was just stupid, hence the name of the book, Changing Lanes. It was a bit weird. Like, for me, like I said, that's when her insecurities came out, which I definitely appreciated because it made her seem more human. But at the same time, there was that air of not like I'm weird, I'm not like other girls, like I like cars, like I'm gonna surprise you with the quirky things that I'm into. Another thing I did really like about the book is she's a reader. So obviously she is really excited that her favorite author is in the same city as her. I thought that was cool. I like, you know, from a reader's perspective, reading about a reader, and like a fangirl, basically. She does work in a bookstore eventually. I thought that was really cool. And it does read, and this was like a confusing thing for me. I like both gave it a point and took away half a point for this. It reads like a Hallmark movie. So it's very cheesy. It's very like, girl moves to new town, meets new guy. She's a little bit older than him, which is something I did like about the book. She does like kind of freak out about it and then eventually gets over it, because I think age, when you're a consenting adult, like is not that important. But I thought it was cool. And like I said, it was very much so a Hallmark movie-esque kind of thing. Very fun, very, you know, they're like streaking at one point on a girls' night out. They're jumping into the lake naked. There's like sex on boats. Like there's a sex on motorcycle like scene at one point. Like it's very weird, but I thought it was fun. That's why I gave it 3 stars. Like I really tried to look at it from an independently published standpoint, because there were aspects of the book that I really enjoyed and aspects that I didn't. I think with a little bit of reworking, this would have been a 5-star read for me. It just was, there were a couple of things that just sort of drug it down for me, but not an unenjoyable read by any means. The next book I read is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I'm actually halfway through the second one right now. I buddy read this with G, although I will say buddy read very loosely because this is when my OCD was getting really bad, and so I was kind of like trying to push through but really struggling with it. Get a Life, Chloe Brown is about Chloe Brown. She is trying to rework her life, basically. She feels like she's maybe being a little too careful. There are things she wants to experience before she dies, and that is because she has a very near miss with a drunk driver where she's almost run over. So she gets a new apartment, moves in, you know, she's definitely like work from home because she is disabled in some ways. Like she definitely experiences chronic pain, a lot of pain management, a lot of headaches, a lot of fatigue, things like that. Definitely illnesses that I feel like aren't necessarily really focused on. They don't get a whole lot of attention, I feel like, in books. So there is a man who kind of runs the maintenance of their apartment. His name is Red. He is an artist. He's basically like a fallen artist. Like he stops creating art after a while because of something traumatic that happens in his life. But she ends up kind of enlisting him to help her with her list. And the reason why this happens is because he also kind of enlists her help in getting back on his feet when it comes to his art. Now, it's obviously a love story. They do definitely end up together. Like that's kind of, there's definitely a formula when it comes to romance novels. I've actually read that you specifically have to write it in a certain way. I mean, I'm sure there's like independent stuff that's very different, but like the overall themes are pretty much the same. I really like this book because Chloe, like I said, does have a lot of invisible illnesses like chronic pain and such, like definitely things that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. I've had a lot of friends say that they loved Chloe for that very reason for this, and I like it because Red takes care of her, and he doesn't do it in like a pitying way. He doesn't do it in a judgmental kind of way, which Chloe addresses in the story, that her ex-fiance and her friends have kind of blown her off and cut them out of her life because she does live with this on a pretty constant basis. And so she has that insecurity. Once again, I do like characters that do have a bit of insecurity and character flaw, so I appreciated that in this story as well. So for me, it was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. There was not necessarily anything I disliked about it, but it wasn't my favorite book that I've ever read. So the next book I read, I gave 3 stars. It is Halloween at the Graph. It is I believe it was like a Kindle Unlimited book, or like who is texting me? It was like a Kindle Unlimited book or something like that I just ended up buying. And basically it follows our main character, whose name I can never freaking remember, Walker. Her name is Walker, and Callum is like the love interest. So basically she is kicked out of like corporate New York. I think it was like New York or something. Something happened. There was a lot of drama, and she basically runs away to Montana, I believe, and she becomes the liaison for this hotel. So not like the overall manager of the hotel, but to try to bring attention to the hotel because it's a very small city or a very small town. And that is how a lot of their revenue comes from. So because of that, she reaches out to Callum, who is basically a ghost hunter on, you know, some like TLC show or some shit like that. And she tries to enlist him to come back. Now, to come to the hotel to film his Halloween episode there, the like season finale, because she knows it would be really good publicity for the hotel. Now, obviously it's a romance novel, so they do have a bit of tension. I can't remember if this book is explicit in the sex that's in it. I don't remember if it's fade to black or not. Book didn't really stick with me. One thing I thought was cool about it is there is a supernatural element to it. So the hotel is definitely haunted, but it's not haunted in that it is the main focus of the novel. A lot of it is about her trying to refine herself, about Callum trying to find himself. The reason why I gave it 3 stars is for a couple of reasons. The writing was a bit disjointed, definitely could have used like a couple more revisions. There was a lot of like drug on storytelling. A lot of the dialogue was a bit abrupt. Another thing is I don't like the romance. I don't like it at all because Callum is this guy who's just like going through life. He's kind of having a midlife crisis and he meets her and he's suddenly within like 3 pages completely infatuated with her, and it's just, I don't mind insta love, I honestly don't, but I think that for me this one was just a bit cringe because the characters don't make any sense. So she the entire time is kind of reeling against it, doesn't really want it, you know, is like, I can't believe I'm feeling like this, and that makes sense considering like her past. But with Callum it doesn't really make sense because he's supposed to be this scorned person who is kind of like jaded about life, and then suddenly meets her and she like reignites a spark. And then at one point in time you find out that his best friend that he's actually there to visit is like her long lost cousins, and it's a bit of a weird story, but it's like a I found my home, I belong here kind of thing for both of them. So not the worst story I've ever read, but for me, like, I tried to rate it on enjoyment and I gave it 3 stars. So not the best I've read and not the worst. And like I said, you can find it on Kindle Unlimited if you, I don't know, are looking for like a fluffy autumn kind of read. The next book that I read was from Jen DeLuca. This is a repeat of a book that I have read before, and it is Well Met. I actually have the second one on my TBR for October. I'm really excited to read it. I got the audiobook because I listened to this on audiobook actually and loved it. I gave it 5 stars again. Follow me for a while, you know this is one of my favorite books of all time. Follows our main character Emily, and she moves back to small town to take care of her sister and her niece. Her sister is in an accident while driving and basically is immobile because like her leg is shattered. And if you know anything about like car accidents and stuff, when it comes to leg injuries, they take a while to work through. So she comes back to the small town to help her sister, and she ends up having to sign up for a Renaissance fair because her niece wants to participate and there needs to be an adult. And she meets a man named Simon the first day. Simon is the organizer. He has kind of taken over responsibilities from his brother, which you find out later it's because his brother has passed away. That does play, I wouldn't say like a huge part in the story, but a pretty big, it's like a, I don't even want to say it's like a cliffhanger, like a plot twist, but it is important. It is something that Emily ponders like throughout the story a lot. But Simon is a dick to her. So when they are signing up for the Ren Fair, working through it, like getting like logistics and stuff figured out, she hates him. He, you think, hates her. Like she gets the vibe that he's just a fucking dick. But when they get into the actual Renaissance Fair, when she is a bar wench and he is one of the pirates, sparks fly. So it's very, it's cool because you get to kind of, like when he is in his pirate's costume and he is out on Ren Fair, he's like free and breezy and is just like open to everything because they do address like societal pressures and the pressures of family and the pressures of just life in general and how that weighs him down and how it kind of like weighs her down at the same time because she does have a very tumultuous past. Her ex-fiance does leave her because he becomes a lawyer, even though she's is working to support him, and the goal was that once he became a lawyer she would go back to school. So she like drops out of school. She has all these preconceived notions of the way people perceive her, and she's wrong throughout the entire story. So I actually really liked it. Again, like it was still very strong for me, very fun. Obviously it is a romance novel. There is sex in it. It is explicit sex if you are not looking for something like that. But I would recommend this for autumn if you are into romance and you haven't like hopped on the hype train of Well Met, because it is very autumn. Like I said, very Ren Fair, very like, you know, small town, the perfect setting for autumn, which is why I'm going to be reading the second one in October. But like I said, 5 stars, again, highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, you need to read it if you're into, well, even if you're not in romance, I think you should read it because it's fucking cute. All right, now we're at the part of my reading experience of September where I had a complete mental breakdown and reread all my favorites and read books by one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is Christina Lauren. So first book that I read would be The Unhoneymooners. I gave it 5 stars again because this is, other than Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, which clearly we will get to here in a minute, this is one of my favorite books by Christina Lauren. It follows her main character Olive and her love interest, whose name I can never remember, Ethan. I hate the name Ethan. I'm so sorry if your name is Ethan, but if you're writing a book and you have a character named Ethan in it, just fucking remove it. Change it to something else. No Todds, no Ethans, no Chads, no Codys. I hate those names. Basically, Olive's sister is getting married, and Olive's new brother-in-law, Ethan is his brother, so her brother-in-law is also Ethan. They are at the wedding. Ethan doesn't do buffets. There's like a buffet thing because Olive's sister is one of those people who does like couponing and like she has great luck, so she always invests in like draws and stuff. So she won a lot of their wedding stuff. She won like the buffet. She won their honeymoon, which is to Hawaii. So basically everyone except for Olive and Ethan gets sick at the wedding, and her sister and his brother kind of pushed them to go on this vacation for them. Well, not necessarily her brother, but definitely her sister is like, I want this vacation, you should go, and Olive decides she's gonna go. Well, Ethan's brother at the same time tells him, I want this vacation, or, you know, we want this vacation, you should at least go and, you know, experience it. Little do they know that they're going together because the couple didn't actually, you know, kind of tell each other that that was the plan. So they're off to Hawaii. And the thing is, Olive has this preconceived notion that Ethan actually hates her. There's a lot of story that I can't really give away if you haven't really read this, but this is a romance novel, so you can kind of see sort of where things are going. Parts of this book that I really liked is that Ethan seems like such a stone cold dick. Like, he's not necessarily mean to Olive. Like, a lot of their interactions where you get this vibe is from internal monologue from Olive herself. A lot of Olive being like, oh, why is he acting like this? Oh, he's acting like this because of A, B, C, D, but not necessarily because he has said something. And a lot of the time when he does clap back at her, it's because she is coming to the conversation semi-hostile or with this air of like, I know you don't like me, but fuck you, basically. Another thing that I really like is because of that, you get an eye into a lot of Olive's insecurities, a lot of things that Olive struggles with. I know she doesn't necessarily struggle with, but she is kind of a little bit leery on like her weight and what she looks like. She does address that because her and her sister you know, kind of have like conversations about it or whatever, and she has, like I said, a lot of internal monologue about that. The point where she realizes that Ethan doesn't like her is because she's going to eat cheese curds at this fair when, like, the first time that they meet, and he kind of looks down on her, or what she perceives is looking down on her for the cheese curds. And the cheese curds come back later on because obviously they are from Wisconsin, and that's like a running theme of the book for some reason, which I thought was really funny. Another thing that I really like about this book, without giving too much away, is the characters and their banter. I think that Christina Lauren, and I've said this before, has a really good way of writing characters that are just fucking funny. Like, their dialogue is funny, the interactions that they have are funny, like the internal monologues that they have are funny. I think that for me, the reason why I love their books so much is because of the humor. I love books with humor. So this one I gave 5 stars, obviously. The next one I read, you guys know, is my absolute favorite book by Christina Lauren, and it's Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. I gave this 5 stars before. This was my favorite read of like 2018, 2019, something like that, and it is still one of my favorite books of all time. Basically, this book follows Hazel and Josh. Hazel is a quirky, she's like a school teacher. I can't remember what grade she teaches. I believe it's like younger kids, so she's very much so into like art and like crafts, and she is very off the wall. So if she decides she's going to do something, she does it no matter how quirky or weird it is. And she is best friends with a girl that she works with, or that she's going to be working with. That's kind of how the story opens, is that she gets a job with her best friend and her best friend's husband at this school. Well, in comes Josh, who is the sister of her best friend. Now, I don't know necessarily kind of story-wise like how they missed the fact that they are related, or, you know, or that, you know, her best friend has a brother named Josh who she had been in love with at one point. But Hazel decides, in her greatest, achievement of life, I think, to double date with Josh. So she will go on a date with someone and he will go on a date with someone, and they'll kind of pick the partner for them. So Hazel will pick out a girl for Josh to go on a date with, and Josh will pick out a guy for Hazel to go on a date with, and they go together. Because if there is if it's awkward or whatever, they can leave together. There's like backup at this, at the date. Obviously it's a romance novel, so there is a little bit of sexual tension and a little bit more from Josh and Hazel. But they are truly best friends, which I think is what I love about this. And another thing that I love about the story is Hazel, I very much so identify with her. If you suffer from like bipolar or anything like that, you'll know what mania looks like. And while it is like my favorite part of my mental illnesses that I have, you can see it in Hazel. And you get to see kind of how Hazel gets judged for being very quirky and weird and off the wall. Like there is an ex that comes back into her life in the story, and you get kind of like the backstory on why she is the way that she is, or why she feels semi-self-conscious about things like that. But overall, this is just a fun story. It's another fun Christina Lauren story, and for me, it is my favorite because I identify so much with Hazel. Like, I absolutely love her. The next book that I read was weird. It is by Christina Lauren. Like I said, I read almost their entire list of books that they have. And it is the Honey Don't list. And if you've been around for a while, you'll know that this was on my list of books that I never wanted to read because a friend of mine whose reviews I really trust rated it pretty low. And I ended up giving it 3 stars. This is one of my least favorite Christina Lauren books that I've ever read. But it is called The Honey Don't List. I think I already said that. Basically, this follows 2 characters, Carrie and James. So Carrie and James are the assistants to basically, well, they're called the Trips. They are Melissa and Rusty. I like this book so little that I can never remember their names. But anyway, Carrie is the assistant to Melissa. And James is supposed to be the engineer for the company, but he ends up kind of being Tripp's assistant, and he sort of abuses that power. But basically, they are Melissa and, oh God, what is his name? Rusty. God, I hate these names. Melissa and Rusty are this power couple that owns some like company similar to, if you've ever seen the show Fixer Upper, they definitely give me those vibes. Like I think like at one point in time they referenced that show, but they are like HGTV stars that do a lot of home remodels. And the thing is, they fucking hate each other. So their assistants are supposed to keep them together while they're going on this worldwide tour about promoting their book and their new season of their show, while simultaneously cheating on each other and hating each other and just being general assholes. And so it falls on Carrie and James to kind of keep them together. So the plot line of the story is a bit weird, and as somebody who is a big fan of Fixer Upper, I didn't like the hidden agenda here, nothing is ever what it seems, because fucking, I'm not that invested in famous people, let's just be real here, but also because I am semi-invested in that show, so it was a bit like I couldn't pull those characters out of my head, like real life people that I've seen on HGTV. I just kept putting them on the Trips instead. So it felt kind of weird to me. There is a bit of a romance that happens between, well, not a bit. There's a romance that happens between the 2 characters, and it felt really disjointed and also kind of weird. The one thing that I do like about this book is Carrie she has like a physical thing that happens with her hand where she's not able to hold things, and she does her hands clench and she's not able to unclench them and so forth. So I like that that was in the story because she actually is sort of getting abused throughout the story in the sense of she is the one who comes up with the designs, and the Trips are the ones who basically just rip it off and, put it in their show. So there's also a little bit of a mystery there because the way the book starts out, it is being interviewed by the police, and you don't find out why everyone's being interviewed by the police until the end of the book. It was just weird. It wasn't funny like it normally is. It didn't flow like it normally does. And I'm wondering if at certain points in time when Christina Lauren writes books, because it is 2 authors, if one author takes the helm and on another book, another author takes the helm. So I'm wondering if I would like books by these authors separately, because for me with Christina Lauren, I either fucking love the book and it's amazing, or I'm just like, this is trash. And this is one of those books that was pretty much trash. Not the worst, like I said, but definitely not the best. I read it on Kindle. I didn't listen to the audiobook, but you can definitely tell when you go to look at your local library, almost all of the Christina Lauren audiobooks have a long hold on them. And this one, even though it is new, it does not have a hold at all. So I think that also speaks a lot to kind of like the content and like the overall reception of this book. So the next Christina Lauren book I read, I won't stay here for too long, is My Favorite Half Night Stand, which follows Millie and Reed. Millie and Reed work together. I would say Millie is definitely our main character in the book, but she is friends with a band of guys. And the thing about it is that Millie, they're very open with each other, like everyone kind of is, but Millie does keep a lot of her information, like some of her life experiences and stuff, close to the chest. So they don't know a whole lot about Millie, which becomes a problem later on in the book, but essentially they all work together and there is a ball where Obama is going to be speaking, so they need to get dates. So they decide to all together go in and start online dating. So she helps them create profiles for them because she is very witty and funny and still one of my favorite characters that I've ever read. And Millie, at first, when she sends them her profile, she starts getting a lot of like dick pics and the normal stuff that women get online. So she decides to create an alias account, which she doesn't tell the guys about because they are, you know, being like, you need to create, you know, you need to change your profile. Like, this is awful, blah, blah, blah. So she's kind of like shamefully is like, well, I'm not going to tell them. So she goes online and creates this other profile and actually matches with her best friend, Reed, which you can kind of understand sort of what's happening here. So he is talking to Millie online and she's waiting for him to kind of realize that it's her, but he never does. And at one point she kind of ends up really liking the attention and really liking their connection. So she doesn't necessarily want to tell him. And at the same time, Millie and Reed in real life start also sort of having a relationship. So it's a very interesting book and I can't really talk about it without giving too much away. I mean, I feel like that at all is a lot, but it is the premise of the book. They start sort of sleeping together while they are both online dating, but at the same time, Millie is online dating him and he is online dating her and one other person. So they do address that. One thing I really like about this is it does have a lot of found family aspects to it, because Millie does have a lot of trauma with her family, and because of that she has become really good friends with the guys, and like I said, sort of just decides that they are her new family. You get to experience Reed's family, which is really big, really loving. I like that. I like the group of friends as well. I gave this book 5 stars. I will continue to give it 5 stars. Definitely still one of my favorites. For me, it's just a very simple and fun read from one of my favorite authors. And this is one of those books that I'm like, okay, I really like this one, but I will talk about the next book that I read, which is Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren, which I gave 4 stars, which I think at this point I could probably give it 3. The reason why I liked this one a lot, or even at all, is because of the characters. So, follows our main characters. Why can I never find them? Carter and Evie. So Evie is the main character. Carter is her love interest. They work in LA. Evie has grown up there her entire life. Carter, I don't know if he's grown up there, I can't remember, but he also works in the same business that she does. And basically they are, I don't want to say publicists, I don't want to say assistants. They work in the film industry. So they work in like with clients and finding good movies or shows or whatever it may be to star in, and they work on opposing companies. They meet at a Halloween party. She dresses up as something from Harry Potter and he also dresses up as something from Harry Potter, and they kind of like hit it off and start talking, but they realize that they are not going to work because they are on opposing teams in a job market that is very fraught with like betrayal and drama and things like that. And she's like, I'm just not gonna deal with that at all. But they do end up kind of starting to date. And when this happens, their companies actually merge together. So they used to work for opposing companies. That company becomes one. So through a lot of it, it is competition between them. Evie is, you know, trying to get a leg up. She's shit on basically for being a woman by the guy who runs her company, and her love interest James gets to actually kind of experience that. At the same time, what am I doing? Why did I call him James? His name is Carter. I'm losing my mind. So Carter is seeing these things happen to her and hates it and wants it to stop. But at the same time, he's also trying to further his career. So that's why it's called Hating You, Dating You, because they are dating. And when it is just them, it's amazing. It's wonderful when they exist in this like little bubble of just them. But when they are at work, it is very toxic. So not my favorite book that I've ever read. I feel like logistically, a little bit of the story didn't really make sense. I didn't really connect with the characters other than Evie, like to an extent. I did connect with her, but Carter I did not connect with really at all. Like he has like a famous brother, and it was very weird and disjointed. So not my favorite, but not the worst Christina Lauren book I've ever read. Twice in a Blue Moon is definitely the worst Christina Lauren book I've ever read in my entire life. I think that book is absolute garbage. So the next 2 books I read are actually by the same author, and I believe I gave them both 4 stars. The first one is The Friend Zone. This is about our main characters, Josh and Kristen. I always want to call her Kirsten, so I had to look it up. Kristen and Josh. Kristen and Josh meet because Kristen is best friends with Josh's best friend. And they sort of hit it off because Josh is not weirded out by her wit. He is not, because she's very sassy. She's sassy like I am, like sassy almost to the point of being mean, like sort of like a bitch, but what can you do? Because that's on trauma. So she is very much so like withdrawn in a way because she does have a fiance who is in the military. I believe he's in like the Air Force or the Navy or something. Not fiance, but you know, eventually you assume that is what's gonna kind of happen because Kristen does worry about that during the story. So basically Josh ends up working with her because Kristen makes dog like ladders, which are like, or dog steps to beds, like for people who have like little dogs where they live. She also makes like shirts and things like that. So she runs an independent business. Josh is a firefighter with his best friend. So they meet because Josh ends up working for her. And the thing about this story is they do sort of start to fall in love. Like Kristen definitely lets her guard down a lot more with him because they meet under the pretense of she wants nothing to do with him. Like she dresses really, you know, like in sweatpants and big t-shirts and wears face masks and her hair up all like she's not attempting to impress him, but they do become friends. And because of that, she does start to kind of like let her guard down a little with him. So naturally there's a little bit of an evolution of love that starts to happen. And because that starts to happen, she, you know, even though she's distancing herself and making sure nothing inappropriate happens, she starts to kind of wonder where these feelings are coming from. Now, later on, her and her fiance, or her, I keep saying fiance, but her and her boyfriend break up and her and Josh do kind of start a romance. Now, the thing about this is the reason why she struggles with this is because Josh wants a big family, but she is infertile. So they do discuss that a lot in this book. There's even an addendum to the book where the author's like, you know, after the conclusion, like talks about how this story was sort of inspired by one of her friends. And I really appreciated that. This story was just fun. And I like Kristen as a character because, like I said, once again, she resonates with me. She reminds me of me. And I like the overall themes of the book, kind of that like, I'm into you, but I don't really want to be into you, but like, I kind of want to know sort of what you're all about, and I can feel my walls kind of coming down, but it definitely scares me. So it seemed very realistic also. Like it wasn't like for me, like a traditional like romancy kind of novel. If you've read these, let me know down below because I've not heard anybody talk about them. But I also read the After Ever playlist, which follows, this is kind of spoilers. This might be spoilers. If you've read the first one but haven't read the second one, or if you've not read either of these, skip this part when you see the book go down because I am going to kind of spoil a little bit of the first one. Basically, Kristen's best friend, whose name is, why can I never remember? Sloane, is left basically a shell of a human when her fiance, Josh, from the previous book, when he dies in a motorcycle accident, and she is unable to kind of pull her life back together. She's unable to continue. Now, this story is a bit cheesy. Like the storyline is a bit cheesy. Basically, Sloane one day is driving and she's like going to visit her ex-fiance who passed away in like on the day of his death. Like she's going to the graveyard. And when a dog jumps into her car. So for 3 weeks, she has this dog. And it is because there is a famous musician who is out of town. And it's actually his dog who he left with a friend. He doesn't have access to his phone with like time change and, you know, like internet and stuff. He just has no access to anything like that. He's been really busy like dealing with stuff. He thought his dog was fine with this person that he left it with. Obviously, he is not. So when he eventually gets back in touch with her, she's like, you can't have your fucking dog back. Like, it's basically my dog now. I've had it for 3 weeks. Like, you abandoned it. You left it with somebody who didn't take care of it. You're not getting your dog back. A little bit of a romance ensues because they start kind of flirting and he is very interested in her. That's really all of the story I'm going to say because I can't really go into much more without ruining it, but I also gave this one 4 stars. So I gave the first one, The Friend Zone, and After playlist 4 stars as well. I think they were just fun. Like I liked the characters. I felt a lot of heart. I felt a lot of like real world stuff happening. This video is already 30 minutes long, so I'm not gonna like linger here for too long, but it was just fun and also heartbreaking at the same time. Like it made you laugh and then it also made you really sad. So one of my favorite reads for the month, definitely. The next book that I read is For Now and Ever After, The Inn at Sunset Harbor by Sophie Love. I don't remember the characters in this book. I don't really remember much about it. I gave it 2 stars. I think I'm going to give it 1 though, because basically a girl whose name I can't remember, meets a boy whose name I can't remember, because she decides one day after her fiance doesn't propose, or her boyfriend doesn't propose to her, that she's like, fucking done. I'm gonna move to this tiny ass town with this house that my dad left abandoned for 20 years, and I'm gonna build it up, and I'm gonna fall in love with the guy who lives on the grounds, who's actually the caretaker of the house, and there's like doors with secret things, and like her trying to unpack her trauma, and it was bad. The writing was bad, the story was bad, everything about it was bad. I do not recommend it. Like I said, I gave it 2 stars. I'm actually gonna give it 1. I think I only gave it 2 stars because it entertained me long enough to get out of some OCD thought spirals, but only because it was so fucking terrible. The next 2 books that I read, I'm going to lump these 2 together. This is where we get into some of the nonfiction kind of stuff that I read. So I read 10% Happier and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. If you don't know, I gave both of these, I think, 4 stars. Yeah. Dan Harris is a famous news presenter. He does like Good Morning America. He does a bunch of other stuff, like he followed the war in Iraq pretty closely. What this book is about is Dan is a skeptic of all things like meditation, alternate medicine, like that kind of stuff, because he finds himself to be like a very factual person, like he's very science-based. But when he has a panic attack on national television, he is kind of thrown, not immediately into meditation, but serendipitously later, he becomes the person who starts kind of doing these pieces on alternate medicine. So sometimes he'd be following people around for religion or for, like I said, like meditation or Buddhism or whatever, and he ends up discovering meditation, and he starts kind of researching it and practicing it. And this is a story of his journey and how it made him technically 10% happier. And from a skeptic's point of view, I thought this was really refreshing, because I do meditate, but for me, it was nice to kind of see somebody go at it from a completely like scientific base. Like there is scientific research that backs this. What is it called? The Meditations for Fidgety Skeptics is actually about him and somebody who's very like well known in the meditation community, going around in this bus for a couple of weeks and talking to people about what they think about meditation, what they are, as skeptics, what they think of it, and trying to like inhabit trying to get people to make it a habit. So I thought this was really cool. Like I said, it is a nonfiction book. It's a little bit of a memoir. Definitely the first one is a lot of memoir stuff about Dan, which if you're a fan of Dan, this would be really cool. But as somebody who has no fucking idea who he is, because I don't watch the news, I don't watch television, I get enough of that on Twitter, I didn't know who he was. So just getting to kind of hear about his story as well, I think he's incredibly interesting. I know a lot of people think he's cocky, which Dan would tell you he probably is very cocky. Dan thinks himself he just thinks he's a giant dick. Like, you don't need to tell him he's a dick. He knows he is. But I like that. I like that it was real. You got like a real interpretation of meditation from him. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. The next book I enjoyed both of them. The next book that I read is With the Fire on High, which I didn't know how much I was going to love this because I've heard mixed feelings. But it follows your main character, Monty, and she is a young mother. She has her daughter at 16. And she is going through like the normal life stuff that happens when you have a child at 16, like trying to find alternate ways to do school. And she gets in like this program. And in the program, one of the things that they get to do is a cooking class. Now, very basically in this story, there is a little bit of romance, but there's a lot of heart, a lot of food, and a lot of soul. Because Imani has a very strenuous relationship with her dad because her mom passes away. But there is a sense of like their lineage and their food and in the way that they interact and the way they are respectful to each other. And I loved this book for a multitude of reasons. One, it was fun as fuck to read. I listened to it on audiobook. I loved the audiobook. I love that Imani is very much so like, this happened and it was a bad decision that led to a great thing. I'm not ashamed of myself because this happens. This is my life. Like, I'm not ashamed of my daughter. I'm not ashamed of the life that I live. I'm a strong woman. Like, there's a lot of times in the book where she's like, I need to make an adult decision. And I really appreciated that. And her ex-boyfriend, who she had the baby with, who really wanted nothing to do with her, all of a sudden, because she's sort of talking, and not even in a romantic kind of way to somebody, he gets really mad and is like, I can't believe you're doing that. And she's like, but you're a fucking hoe. Like, I see on Instagram all the time, like, pictures of you and other girls. And, she really starts standing up for herself. And I love that. I think that she is headstrong, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. My favorite part about the book is actually that in the end, that little romance that she was having, it's never truly addressed, like, if they stayed together. And I'm like, that's fucking refreshing, because the story was wholly about Imani and her daughter and like her family and finding herself. And I really liked it. Like I said, I've seen mixed reviews about it, but I loved it. And this book made me hungry. Like, I want some Spanish food. Like, it was really, really, really good. And like I said, the audiobook was definitely one of my favorites. And I'd be interested to read other books by Elizabeth as well, because I have The Poet X. I can actually see it right now. And it's been on my TBR for a really long time. So definitely spurring me to want to read it. The next two books that I read are memoirs and also kind of self-help books, I think. First one that I read is Furiously Happy, a funny book about horrible things by Jenny Lawson. I gave this 4 stars. This is Jenny Lawson. Really, it's like essays. So Jenny has a lot of mental illnesses, and she's very unabashed about that. And she talks about when you have mental illnesses, and I can 100% relate to this. When you have mental illnesses, there's like a little fucking, not even a little, gray cloud that follows you around, but a gray cloud that follows you around, and it's like, life sucks, this sucks, why are you doing this? But you have peaks of sunlight through that gray cloud, and when that happens, it's all about living to the best of your capabilities when you're feeling good, like living furiously happy, like doing things that make you happy, doing things that kind of break out of the mold for you, doing things that make people look at you like maybe you're a little bit freaking weird. And I love it. I love this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was fucking funny. I can't believe that people rate this book low. They're like, this is like ramblings from a mad woman. And she's probably like, yeah, because I'm a fucking mad woman. Like, that's definitely who she is. And I loved it. Like, truly, I think that Jenny is a voice that we all need. Like, she definitely talks about loss and how difficult things are. And I think the quote that really sticks out to me is she said to her husband, she's like, if you didn't have me around, your life would be better. And he said, my life would definitely be easier, but it would not be better. And I said that to Rocco last night, and he's like, yeah, he's like, life can always be like easier, you know what I mean? Like, but it wouldn't be better without us. Like, your mental illness doesn't define you in the way that you think it defines you. Like, your mental illness is just a part of you. And that is something that I'm learning like through therapy recently, is that your mental illness doesn't need to be the be all end all of who you are as a person. Like, just as if you had, you know, some kind of physical impairment, like say you had diabetes, that is just a part of you. And you wouldn't be mean and harsh to yourself because you had diabetes. You would take care of yourself. And the same thing is with mental illness, because you have a mental illness because of some extenuating circumstance. It's completely out of your control. It can be because of past trauma. It can be because it's hereditary, which is a lot of what I have is hereditary and also from trauma, but we don't have enough time in this video for that. So it doesn't need to be like you're less because you have it, because it's out of your control. And you wouldn't be mean to a friend that, you know, struggled with the things that you struggle with. You would show them kindness. So that's a lot of what this book is about, is like showing yourself kindness and accepting like that this is who you are. And the book was super refreshing because, like I said, it's all over the place, and I loved that because that is definitely how my brain works. And I can identify with, like, sometimes when she was in like a manic episode, or sometimes when she was depressed when she was writing the book, and you know, some of the life experiences she had throughout the book. I really loved it. I wish more people would read it because it was fucking fantastic. And the last book I read is Over the Top, A Raw Journey to Self-Love by Jonathan Van Ness. I gave this 3.5. But I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads because I thought it was important. Jonathan Van Ness is he's a non-binary individual who, I don't know if a non-binary is necessarily the word that I'm looking for, but anyway, he doesn't subscribe to like male, female, you know what I mean? Like, he's not like, oh, I'm a man, so I'm very, very I'm very, very male, or like, I'm very, very feminine. He's just like, I exist to exist, and I do what I want to do to feel happy. This book spurred, I'm assuming from the fact that he was on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, like, or I think that's what they still call it, or I think they might just call it Queer Eye now. But it is a show they revamped on Netflix, a show that I fucking loved when I was younger. And so I haven't gotten to watch a whole lot of the new one because I haven't gotten around to it because people said it was sad, and I wasn't really into like, you know, like happy sad or whatever. But this story follows Jonathan's like entire life. He is gay. He is completely out. He's been out pretty much his entire life. He also has HIV. He does address that later on in the book. But the thing that I loved about this book is it was so raw. Like, he very much so is just like, yeah, this is what happened. You know, I am a toxic individual. This is, you know, my mental illnesses and sort of how they impacted my life. And I see a lot of, I have borderline personality disorder, and I see a lot of that in some of the things that Jonathan did. Now, for me, it's something that I've I don't want to say I got under control because you can never really get that, but I can kind of see the warning signs. And it was interesting reading the book and hearing like the warning signs pop up in his head and him being like, oh shit, like I'm going to act out now. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it was really refreshing. Now, the reason why I gave it 3 stars instead of, or 3.5 stars is very disjointed. There's a lot of times where there's brevity that needs to be had in what he's saying, but because there's been previous brevity in the things that he's saying, but instead he will like derail. So that was really weird. The writing style was kind of all over the place, but I guess you can't really knock it for that because it is memoir. But also I listened to the audiobook and it was so fucking slow. Like that, I took off an entire point for that. I had to listen on 2 speed for it to sound fucking normal. Like when I accidentally took it off a 2 speed, I was like, wow, he was literally talking like that. It just drove me insane. So don't listen to the audiobook, read the physical book, but very disjointed. I feel weird rating a memoir like 3.5 stars, but I think it's an important book. There was just like some of the writing stuff really like got to me, and I know people rate this 5 stars. I don't think anybody should rate it low just because I'm saying that. Like if you like the writing style, then go for it. Like with Jenny Lawson's book, people fucking hate the writing style, but I absolutely loved it. So it's definitely a matter of opinion. But those are the books that I read in the month of September. I need to cut this video because it's gonna be like 40 minutes long and I've been rambling for a long time. I just feel like I haven't gotten to talk to you guys in a while. If you've read any of these books and you disagree with my rating, let me know down below. I want to have a conversation about it because I'm opening up a little bit more on YouTube and like social media and stuff for, I feel like a lot of the time we want everybody's opinions to kind of be our own, and we say we don't, but we do. I've seen it a lot recently, so I just want to have a conversation. If you hated a book that I loved or loved a book that I hated, I want to know why, and I want to talk to you about it. But I love you guys. Thank you for sitting with me for the last, I don't know, 40 minutes or something. I hope you guys are well. Truly, truly, I hope you are well, and I will see you in my next video.